Hello and welcome back. We're going to be talking about the spine as your third section of this discussion, or unit I should say, of your spinal information. The spinal cord is a continuation, as we've talked before, of your medulla oblongata as it comes through the foramen magnum, and it will continue down through your spinal canal that is developed by your vertebral structures, and it will continue as a single unit down until about T12 L1-2 area, where it becomes a cone-shaped structure. And it has two enlargements, one up in the cervical area, so more along this region here. You have a little bit of a cervical enlargement, and then you have a bit of a lumbar enlargement as well, where you have a large number of nerves that come off and innervate your extremities, essentially. The meninges that surround your brain also surround the spinal cord as it comes down through the spinal column. So your dura mater continues to be on the outside of the neural structures, and that will continue as that thick layer that will protect the spinal cord all the way through the spinal column, and it will continue down through the sacral canal as well, and eventually become the filum terminale, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then underneath that you have the arachnoid membrane, and between the dura and the arachnoid membrane you have just a little bit of serous fluid, not a whole lot, but a little bit. Again, it's more of a potential space like it is up in the brain. And you will have some ligamentous tissue that will run through those structures to help support the spinal cord. You will also have the pia mater that will adhere directly to the spinal the cord, and it will continue on as a real thin membrane that will separate the space that is that subdural space, subarachnoid space, that will continue down, and it will create that area for the cerebrospinal fluid to continue down and bathe around the spinal cord. And so that pia mater adheres directly to the spinal cord, and then you have the arachnoid membrane in between that is the subarachnoid space. And again, that space has the CSF, but you also have vasculature that runs through that area as well. Outside of the dura mater you do have epidural fat, and so you'll have this fatty tissue that will come out and around. So the dura mater will continue as a protective layer, but outside that again you have epidural fat, and that will help create a cushion between the spinal cord meningeal structures and the bony structures of the spinal column. And that can be seen anteriorly here between the vertebral body and the regions of the spinal cord, and then also in that posterior arch here, and you see that nice fatty tissue that's cushioning. It also keeps that nice core temperature of the spinal cord, keeping it at a consistent temperature whether you're hot or whether you're cold, but also it helps with that minor traumatic changes as we move around. The thecal sac does, again, like I said, it's that dura mater, and it will continue all the way down through the sacral canal. Now the meningeal layers will continue all the way through the nerves that come off of the end of the spinal cord, as it's that conus medullaris as it cones down, and then you have that cauda equina that comes to the horse's tail that comes off of those multiple nerves that come off the end of the spinal cord. The meningeal layers will surround those all the way through with the pia mater. Then you have your subarachnoid space with the CSF. Then you have the arachnoid membrane, but then you have the outside sac, that dural sac that continues down, and that will continue all the way through the sacral canal down to about C2, and then it becomes that filum terminale. You see that here, and it becomes that anchor for the spinal cord and the distal end. The conus medullaris, again, is about the regions of T12 down to about L1. Everybody's a little bit different, but that's kind of the general region. It also helps with the recognition of where that general location is. As you know, with the insertion of needles for looking at what's going on in the spinal fluid and the subarachnoid space with taking out that cerebral spinal fluid. That is a general location below that L2 area for insertion of needles, so it's less likely to interrupt the structures of the spinal cord and get into that subarachnoid space there and pull some of that fluid out. So anyway, that looks just like this here on the MRI image, showing you that cone as it comes down, that conus medullaris structure. The cauda equina, so here again is a kind of a zoomed in view of that conus medullaris. And the cauda equina is the multiple nerve fibers that are coming off of the end of that conus medullaris that will go out and innervate. They become the lumbar and the sacral plexes that will end up innervating your pelvis and your lower extremities. Here you see the change in your vertebral structure. So you have your lumbar spine here, but you also have your changes that will occur inside of the regions of the spinal column, in the regions of the dura mater. No longer is it a singular spinal cord looking structure, but multiple spotty looking nerves that come off the end. This is that cauda equina. It looks like this on a CT because you have an MRI over here. I'm sorry, this is a CT scan. The previous image was an MR. This is where contrast media has been introduced into the subarachnoid space, so it's filling up with contrast media, so you see the filling defects within the regions where the contrast media is, and those are basically the nerve fibers that are creating that filling defect presentation because the nerves are present within that sac structure. So here again we've introduced contrast media into the subarachnoid space, and that thecal sac is being filled in with contrast media, and so you're seeing the nerves coming through inside, and that's what that spotty little structures are inside of that drill sac there. So here again is a presentation. This is an MRI showing you that conus medullaris coming down. Again, it's around the regions of the T12 to L1, and again it comes down at the end. Here is the ends of that conus medullaris comes down, and then you have the thecal sac that continues down through. You can kind of see that presentation here, the dark line, and then you have the conus with the cauda equina on the end with all those nerve fibers coming down. And you can see those lumbar nerves as they come down and exit through the intervertebral foramina, and you have those progress out into the extremities and again down into the pelvic region as the lumbar plexus, and then you have your sacral plexus that will come down as well. I'm going to go ahead and break for a moment so that we have a separation in the two segments of this unit's information as well.